Hello, here's my report on our home's solar PV and Powerwall performance for March 2020, the second full calendar month of operation for our extended electrical system. The report will be based around the same three graphs that were introduced in my February report, and some details of the system were given in the introduction video. I'm not going to repeat all of those details in this episode, so if you need to know more, please have a look at those first two episodes. Late March saw the change from GMT to BST, which, with Economy 7, means a change to the timings of the off-peak period. In the February report, I suggested that the times could be changed in 15-minute intervals in the Tesla app, but when I came to change the timings, at around 6:30 AM on Sunday the 29th of March during the off-peak period, I discovered that changes can only be made in 30-minute intervals unless someone can tell me how to make finer adjustments. Because of the change to the off-peak timings, now 1 AM to 8 AM BST, you will see that the black background to the Tesla app energy usage graphs has moved an hour to the right. In fact, you'll see the change in position in the graphs from Friday the 27th of March onwards, as the screenshots are grabbed a couple of days after the date in question, so that the date is shown in the picture rather than the label yesterday. Sunday the 29th of March was only 23 hours in duration, but there is no gap in the graphs between 2 AM and 3 AM, and a full 24-hour graph has been recorded, and the figures given in the app for peak and off-peak are obviously not correct. The app cannot deal with the hour change accurately, and the figures it shows for self-performance for the month are now wrong, as it is probably calculating across the whole month using the new BST times. Here's the first graph, showing the daily input of energy from the grid and from the two solar arrays, and it's reassuring to see the increase in the solar yellow and orange colours from February to March, and the corresponding decrease in the grid-coloured grey. The storage heater in the annex is still on, so the off-peak draw of energy to the heater still dominates the requirement for grid energy. A single Powerwall full of the previous day's solar energy could not provide all of the storage heater's requirements, and the Powerwall will be down to around 70 or 80% because of evening use by the time the heater comes on. The summary figures on the right reveal that the total amount of solar energy generated in March was 632 kilowatt hours, which was 59.1% of the energy coming in, up from February's 36.5%. Once again, the newer southeast panels produced more than the older southwest panels, despite having a lower peak power rating, but the difference is less than in February as the sun gets higher in the sky. 424 kilowatt hours of off-peak grid energy was imported, with most going to the storage heater and a little going to the Powerwall. 13 kilowatt hours of peak grid energy, an average of 0.4 units per day, was imported, with 7 of those units being imported on the 5th of March, where the red bar clearly shows on the graph. So what went wrong? Wednesday the 4th of March was a moderately sunny day, with enough solar stored in the Powerwall to see the property through the evening. In the early off-peak hours of Thursday the 5th of March, the grid was used for most of the storage heater's needs, but there was no off-peak charging of the Powerwall. The system clearly assumed that the weather would be similar to preceding days, and calculated that only a 9% state of charge at 7 AM was where it should be. But Thursday the 5th of March was very gloomy, with only 2.3 kilowatt hours of solar generated, and the Powerwall ran out around midday. Grid energy was then used for the rest of the peak hours until midnight. I was surprised to see the system decided to have a few bursts of putting peak grid energy into the Powerwall during the afternoon, rather than wait until the off-peak period. The Powerwall was then recharged from the grid, as expected, in the early off-peak hours of Friday the 6th of March. However, in a big overreaction to its error, the Tesla system decided that the state of charge at 7 AM should be around 40%. But the forecast for the day was for plenty of sunshine, and in fact 26 kilowatt hours of solar was generated, so the Powerwall was filled soon after midday, and a quarter of the solar was given away to the grid. The system did not perform in an optimal manner in its stated job of cost saving, but was it a major disaster? the additional cost of my electricity bill for the 2 errors will only be just over £1. However, these events confirmed that the Tesla app does not yet use any local weather forecasting in its programming, so is bound to make errors such as this. As others have reported, it is rumoured that the ability to have some manual input may be added to the app one day in the future for those who wish to help in the decision making, but in the meantime other actions are necessary to help ensure it doesn't happen again. My usual backup reserve for power cuts is only 5%. On a sunny day, when the next day was forecast to be gloomy and when the battery percentage was high, I raised the battery reserve percentage, ensuring that there was enough usable capacity left to get through the evening. This ensured that the battery didn't give too much energy to the storage heater in the early hours next morning. Around the end of the off-peak period at 7 AM, I reduced the reserve back to 5%, freeing the energy to be used during the peak hours of the gloomy day. Now that the off-peak period ends at 8 AM, an alternative action is possible. When I wake, usually sometime between 6 and 7, on what is forecast to be a cloudy day, I can, if necessary, dial the reserve percentage up to force the battery to charge more than it might have done on its own, and then reduce the percentage back to 5% just before 8 AM. It's worked so far on the few days when such action has been necessary, following the 5th of March. Back to the graph. We gave away 48 kilowatt hours to the grid during March, 7.5% of our solar production, which could have been lots of free miles of motoring in an electric car. About a third of that was when we were away on the 11th and 12th, and so when no one was at home to take actions to use that surplus solar energy, and so it couldn't have filled a car anyway. When we were at home in that glorious sunny but cold week towards the end of the month, we decided to switch on 2 low-power electric heaters, 1.2 kilowatts each, in the house, which meant that less oil was burned in the late afternoon and evening. We don't have gas in the village, but when we get an electric car, that energy could alternatively mean more free miles. That is why you can see a big increase in the total energy used by the property compared to February in this second graph, which shows where the energy being used in the property came from, as reported by the Tesla app. On the sunny but cold days when the electric heaters were switched on, daily consumption increased from 20-something kilowatt hours to over 30 and occasionally over 40 kilowatt hours at no extra cost. The energy coming through the Powerwall battery is coloured green. The light green shows solar energy and the dark green shows grid energy, which I calculate to have come via the Powerwall. And finally, black shows the grid energy, mainly off-peak, which went directly to the property. In the summary figures on the right, the percentage of energy coming back out of the Powerwall was 88.8%, a bit better efficiency than February. Here's another observation about the Tesla app. Each morning, when recording the figures in the app for the previous day, I quickly spotted that the peak and off-peak figures for home usage and for grid energy did not add up to the figure given for all day. For home usage, there was a discrepancy of around 1.1 or 1.2 kilowatt hours each day, while the discrepancy for grid energy was more variable. 2 mornings later, the off-peak figures changed to eliminate the arithmetical error. I'm left wondering whether this change on the Tesla servers was a valid correction due to better integration of the original data, or was it just a tidying up of the figures to make the addition correct? Oddly, this morning, the 2nd of April, there were no such arithmetical errors, so it'll be interesting to see what happens over the coming days. The third graph shows the self-power performance, which is the proportion of energy coming direct from solar or from the Powerwall. The amount of yellow and green is well up from February, and the peak time self-power performance was very good, 100% or high 90s on every day except for the 5th of March. Compared to previous years, this March was near the top for the Solar Southwest generation, actually in 3rd place, but only 3 units behind first place 2012 and 1 unit behind 2014. The arithmetic mean for March now stands at just over 282 kilowatt hours, dragged down by the very poor 2013. This composite bar chart shows performance across the years in a different way, revealing how the months contributed to the total in each year. 2019 started better than this year, but the 3 summer months were leaner than in previous years. The first 3 months of 2020 can be described as average. That's it for this episode. I'll leave you with the energy usage graphs produced by the Tesla app for each day of March and hope to see you again next month.